Hey everyone, welcome back to the show. I have with me today Gustavo Canton. He is an analytics leader at Starbucks over in Atlanta, Georgia. Gustavo, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. Hi,
No,
everyone.
no problem.
Happy
Thank you.
Friday.
It's a Friday. We're recording this, so that's all good. I mean, we want to talk about human potential, which is a topic close to my heart. I love the opportunity that us as humans have, and I love that we continue to both reach that potential and break through it, through the years. And we want to talk specifically about sort of technology and analytics and how that can impact human potential, possibly both positively and negatively. But let's see where we go. But before we get into that, do you want to just introduce yourself a bit more, a little bit about you and your background?
Sure. So, well, I'm Gustavo Canton. I was actually born in Panama City. So I came to the US about 2003, and I did my grad studies. I started working for a company as an intern called Sam's Club, which is in the retail space, in the marketing strategy. At the time, analytics was not a thing. So,
Okay.
at the time it was more about just doing data analysis, but people didn't talk about this subject. It wasn't like a sexy role to be in. But it was a fun role to be in, so I loved it. I fell in love with it, and from there, I went to many different areas into the analytics space, in Sam's Club and Walmart, and then most recently, I was working for a company called Schneider Electric that is basically for energy management, located in Paris, France. And this year, I came back to the US, and now I'm here in Atlanta, Georgia. So happy to be here.
Lovely. And drinking lots of coffee or not so much?
Well, today I'm having my tea. I already had my coffee way earlier, but yeah.
Okay. I assume that's standard for if you work for Starbucks. It's just coffee on tap all day.
Oh yeah, and to tell you the truth, I love it. There are few things that I take or drink or eat every day. Coffee is one of those things, so I'm a believer.
So did that drive your decision to go to Starbucks, or is that now a new thing based on being there?
I think it's part of the decision making. It was not the first priority. To tell you the truth,
No.
the reason I joined Starbucks is because even like 5 to 6 years ago, I made a list in my head, and talking to some colleagues in the industry about what are places that I would like to work in the future that have really good core values that align with my values. And I feel that Starbucks was a good company for that. And on top of the fact that they give me some perks to get discounts on coffee, that's even better.
Even better. So what are some of those values then that attracted you? Interested in that? Talking of human potential, that's always good. Behaviors and values sit right in there.
Yeah, for those who don't know the story of Starbucks, it's a super interesting story. And if you ask the leadership, Starbucks is about coffee, but it's more than that. It's about human connection. And that was kind of I would say the philosophy that inspired the company. Is a very people-oriented organization. We care a lot about how do we treat our partners. Partners are our workforce and our customers or communities. So that really, sincerely attracted me to the role. And so far, what I thought from the outside looking in is kind of a reflection of what I'm perceiving, because I see it, how people make decisions and they put the people first, which I'm happy to do. Right.
Yeah, love that. There's a strong link with between human connection. I like that as a value, and human potential. Right. I think we see that that human potential can be enhanced by strong bonds, and that's being tested at the moment, isn't it? In the sort of lockdown that we're in. Is that have you seen that? Have you seen that happen? Is that certainly something in Starbucks or elsewhere that you've seen?
Yeah, I don't know. Different organizations are managing this differently, and I have the interesting experience to be in two different organizations within this year. So I have seen the difference between, for example, what I experienced in Schneider versus I experienced Starbucks. In Schneider, it was in my case, I was in a very global role. We were used to work remotely, so it was kind of like part already of the habit on the day-to-day. In Starbucks, obviously, I wasn't here before the pandemic, but based on what I'm hearing and based on what I know of the culture, there is relationship, it's very important, and face-to-face interaction is super important for us as an organization. And now with having the pandemic, it has kind of like force us a little bit to be more intentional on having virtual meetings, checking in on people, making sure people are okay. And that obviously drives engagement. And it's interesting enough, I was actually looking at some statistics yesterday in some of the markets, how we're doing with customer connection. And actually, in some cases, customer connection is increasing, despite the fact that in many cases, 80% of our traffic comes through drive-thru in some of our locations. So, that tells you that there are ways for us to find that connection, even within this environment of disruption and a little of isolation, right?
Yeah. Well, I suppose if your culture is human connection, then whatever the external influences are, you end up finding a path that allows you to do that. I suppose that's kind of natural if your culture is that strong.
Yeah, I think so. And also, this pandemic, I always say this because obviously it's been a rough year for many people and it has put a lot of pressure. There is no denying, especially if you are working close to customers and you have to be out there day to day, that there is a level of anxiety, right? But on the flip side, and I would say on the optimistic side, I think it's making organizations and leaders understand how much the importance of actually investing in your people, and investing in technology to make sure that the experience is better. All those things are coming and being talked more, which I think is going to help us evolve in the right direction.
Yeah. Let's talk about some of that. The technology and data and analytics that either you're using or planning to sort of put in place that is going to impact on human potential, make us better is the plan, I guess. But can you talk to some of the examples of where you see that working out well in context of the situation we're in, or just more generally with helping to enhance how good we are at jobs and activities and processes?
Yeah, certainly. So first of all, I'm going to say something that might sound a little bit provocative, but I've been in the analytics space for 15 plus years. And trust me, I love analytics. But as I have evolved in my career and kind of my philosophy, before I was doing analytics because it's my passion and I just love to do it, right? And over time, I have realized that analytics is just a mindset or a toolkit that you have to enhance the human potential. And that's a different purpose.
Yeah.
And I'm saying this because sometimes when you are talking with very technical people and have a lot of friends or colleagues in the technical space, in IT or systems engineering or analytics, sometimes we focus too much on the analytics field, not so much on what are we doing with the analytics to truly enhance the potential. And if you look at technology, let's say in the early 2000s, the BI space and all this reporting and analysis was more based on the design of how do we reduce latency, how do we create easier connections with, it was more about like the technical design, so to speak, and then how that gets to the end user or the end customer. Now, I feel that organizations are waking up to the fact that you cannot do that anymore. You need to design first with the user experience or the partner experience top of mind, and then kind of reverse engineering all your systems and technology to match it and integrate them in a way that is going to be consistent and much more effective to the end user. I see that shift happening, and a lot of CTOs that I'm talking about, a lot of experts that I'm talking about are saying this too. So, I'm glad that this is happening because it was a good time to happen. And also now with the technology that we have today with augmented analytics, you don't have to rely on those previous reports of the past that people have to go back and say, hey, I want to change this little column here and these little things here. No, the new technologies that you actually have your portal, you ask a question, and then you can just allow the frontline worker or the frontline partner to be asking all the questions that they want using the AI NLP functionality, which is a big step, right?
Yeah. I think you make some really good points there about I often talk about starting with the end in mind, the end being the outcome that you're trying to drive. And if that's improve human potential, or that's, make a better customer experience, or it's get, in your instance, cars through the drive-through quicker, whatever that is, let's start with that and then work back to analytics, data, or even a spreadsheet, right? That's sort of like the way you get there is a little bit irrelevant to getting there. Or independent rather than irrelevant, and I think that's interesting that you come at it from sort of that angle. Is it always about human potential? Is that what this is all about? Do you think data and analytics and technology enhancing and making human potential better?
I think it should be, because again, it's how do you use data to do and make decisions. You can make decisions with people at the center of the decision and be people centric, or you can make decisions based on profit. You can make decisions, there are many ways to make decisions, but this is my perspective based on what I learned and what I believe is companies who make decisions with people at the center were actually going to be able to sustain their growth over time. And you are seeing now that organizations, you see all these organizations that in the past were putting out these like benchmarking some, best places to work and, most engaged workforce and all these like happiest place to work, these things are good as a starting point. But now I'm seeing organizations that are actually making that like the center of the decision making, and the P&L is obviously a very important component as well. You have to deliver for your shareholders and your stakeholders. But they understand that if they actually make the right decisions and they have basically the human, meaning the workforce and their communities and their customers in mind, it's going to allow them to sustain the growth, and the people, the communities are going to they want them to succeed. You know what I mean? So that's my perspective. I'm sure there is a lot of companies that might not be thinking this way, or you might have an experience working in an organization that doesn't seem that way, and that could be the case. But I try to go into places that I feel that that's top of mind, because this is top of mind for me, and I want to make sure that we have that agenda.
Yeah, well, it's I think you're saying that if you think people first, money follows, rather than thinking about the money and then seeing how you sort of focus your attention of the people to it. It's two sides of the same coin, I guess, but it's just coming at it from a people-centric, as you say, perspective. So, and does data allow us to do that? Data or technology or analytics, if I just summarize that as being data, does that help us? Does that make that job easier, or does that actually move us further away from being people-centric? Does that put it back to being data-centric rather than people-centric?
Yeah, so I don't know if you have seen that there is a documentary on Netflix called The Social Dilemma. And it talks about how, this entrepreneur from social media started working on these things. And at some point in time, something happened. And instead of having social media as a tool to enrich people's life, it sometimes became a game of how do we retain people's attention. And that became the number one goal or priority. And so that has some consequences, right? So again, if you think that data and analytics should be a tool to help us enhance the human potential, then great. If you are using data and analytics for other purposes, you have a different goal, you're gonna get a different outcome from it. And I'm just gonna give you a very pragmatic example, going back to the experience piece, right? If you always say as an organization that your people is your number one asset and you believe it, do something very simple. Every time you're gonna design something, a product, a portal, analytics solution, go and talk to the stakeholder and say, okay, listen, I'm gonna give you this tool. I'm gonna make sure it's very high adoption, because obviously you wanna make sure that you adopt this tool. I like 80% or plus. That's just my rule of thumb. And I like 4.5 out of 5 stars in experience. Like if you set that expectation from the beginning and you work and everybody communicates that, again, you are putting the right goal, because in the end, I want that person to have the experience. I want people at work to have the same experience that they have at home. And funny enough, now we will live in a world that my home is here. My bedroom, I wake up like 10 feet from here. I just walk here, and now this is my office. So the lines between your personal life and your work life is blurred. It's great.
So just have the right end goal in mind. It becomes what you. I do like that. I do like that explanation of kind of social media, Facebook specifically, I guess there on. It used to be about, and some I think still believe, around human connection and social connections and keeping in touch. But you're right, that's not the metric. The metric is advertising bucks. So the model changes completely. That then drives the day-to-day metric to be about engagement. So then you get people seeing, so it definitely changes the nature of the platform. Whether that changes the way the user necessarily feels or whether they care, but it does change the sort of macro context that it's operating in, which moves them from where they initially started.
Yeah, and there is a lot of psychology into this. You can make these tools to become addictive, and some of them are addictive, and that's the whole purpose, because they want you to, again, your attention span is very limited. You are right now doing many things at the same time, and they are competing for your attention. So obviously, they're going to try to do their best to keep you engaged, but that shouldn't be the metric that we should be going after. In my opinion, the metric that we should be going after is, how do we make people, first of all, feel that they are in a safe, inclusive environment, and from there, how do they continue to have their well-being and work, on their day-to-day life, and have, feel fulfilled and feel energy, with the energy to do things and be positive about things, to then be productive in whatever they choose to do at work, or their passions, whatever it is. Like, that should be, in my opinion, that the core thinking or philosophies that we need to have for our workforce.
Yeah. Because I agree with a lot of that, and certainly from a purpose perspective, people want to feel part of something, and the organization should have a way of articulating what that purpose is that beats, make money or drive advertising revenue, whatever it is. But often, when it comes to it, it is if you're not, unless you're in kind of third sector, charities or government, that kind of thing. If you're in a commercial business, you're in a commercial business, and often it is about, growth and scaling a business and making money and opening in new markets. So it is often a financial thing. How do you balance that then? Again, does data, does technology help this? Is actually, it is in fact what you're saying in terms of your philosophy that, forget data, forget tech. Let's just have this ethos of human connection and human potential at the heart, and everything else sort of sorts itself out. Is that where you're coming from?
Yeah. So let's look at this pragmatically speaking. Let's say I'm talking to somebody in finance, right?
Yeah.
Think about this. Again, I am coming from the notion that your talent is your number one asset, right? So the same way that you in marketing have marketing campaigns and you invest X amount of dollars in marketing campaigns, you get back X amount of dollars. There are several metrics that are important on this. Number one, if you actually do a survey between the top CEOs and you look at the data, tangible data on how organizations grow in the last decade, you will see that organizations that are purpose-driven are outperforming the market. And they are actually doing as well as organizations like in Silicon Valley, who are like the most innovative, technology-driven technology. So that's number one. Number two, the workforce today is not the same workforce that 10 years ago. You have all this talent, digital talent, analytics talent, like very sometimes scarce talent in specific areas. Yeah. And there is a war happening to try to attract and retain that talent. A lot of these generations are very purpose-driven, right? Mm-hmm. Same as I am. Yeah. So they are not going to come to a place and just, have meetings on how do we improve profit. Like, that's not the way they are wired. That's not their values. So after 1 year or maybe even 2, you're going to lose them. I mean, in Silicon Valley, the average, I think the average tenure for somebody, for example, in Uber is roughly a year. Right. In Facebook, I think it's roughly 2 years. I'm talking about the whole tenure for the organization. I mean, that's very, very,
it's short,
different to what happened 10 years ago. Yeah. And the third piece is what I was telling you in terms of the sustainability of the organizations. There is a reason why all these, global companies are getting into the sustainability realm, into the let's make our communities better, let's have, in the case I was in Schneider, I love their tagline, making energy a basic human right. In the case of Walmart, it was about, let's make the cost of living and expenses lower for all humanity. There are all these big things. I believe in the next decades, if an organization don't do that and don't think that way, they will not survive. I know that might seem a little bit altruistic from me, or maybe naive to think that way, but I believe that's the path that we're going. And the earlier we start learning how to manage our corporations with that mindset, like a community mindset, the easier it's going to be for us to adjust to that new reality in the future.
But what do we need to do differently? So take financial services. Let's use that example, or Silicon Valley. Heavily capital-driven kind of organizations, or traditional large global corporate businesses. What do people need to do differently to act and behave that way? Because I think there is a danger, isn't there, that you an organization can end up coming up with a sort of tagline to sound purpose driven, and it's not felt, it's not cultural. It's just marketing or something that we feel we should do. What do organizations really need to do, and what do people need to, is this top down basically, or does it just happen? Does it happen that way because people will vote with their feet in terms of whether they, join these companies or not?
Yeah, I mean, I believe there is definitely a need to have leadership top down. I believe that when you set the vision and the roadmap for an organization, especially when it's long term, you have to have somebody at the top that look at it that way. That's one piece. But I do believe we are in a time that the individual has a lot of power to redefine organizations. So, sometimes, I'm from Panama, let's say, right? And in Panama, it's a beautiful country. There is a lot of great things, but our government sometimes might not be the most, what I would say, the optimal way of govern. Let's put it that way, right? Okay. I have two ways to look at it. We can even say, hey, I give up, and this is just the way it is. Or we can say, no, we can make our country better. So let's try to do these things and make it better. And I think you can change that. You have seen through history, a lot of the biggest transformations that you have seen sometimes in humanity come from a small group of people who are able to rally society to go forward. So to be pragmatic, if I were a CEO in an organization, what I would start looking is, I would stop saying, let me see how am I doing in my headquarters, let's say, specifically in how we're doing with our finances and how we're doing with things. And let's look at, okay, we live in a community. Let's put goals based on how we make sure we have good jobs for our community. We have a very safe environment. We can attract talent to that community. When you start thinking beyond the walls of your headquarters, I think it's a much easier way to get to that conclusion. And there are companies. Have you heard about this company called DSM? It's a company from the Netherlands.
I don't think I have, no.
Yeah, Dutch state mining company. Right. They stay as a state mining company for, I think they have, I don't want to say maybe 100 years. It's a very well-established organization. And they switched their model from what they started doing in the beginning to now they are focusing on micronutrients and nutrition for countries that are underdeveloped. That's a very, very drastic change on business model. But in my opinion, that's the kind of decisions that you have to make to be sustainable. And whenever the time comes and people start realizing what is happening, they're going to have like a heads up or a head start compared to other organizations, right? So it's an advantage.
No, that's great. Just I want to sort of move on to thinking about the individuals here. So, particularly in the time that we've got at the moment, lots of pressure, lots of change, lots of isolation in some instances. I'm talking sort of around the impact of sort of lockdown and politics. And it's impacting people's stress and anxiety and health and well-being and all. When those things aren't optimal, I know that the levels of mental health challenges, stress levels can go up, anxiety can go up, and that all has a negative impact on human potential. You tend not to be able to perform at your best when you're mentally not at your best or physically not at your best. How does technology or data or both play a part in, or even, or frankly, neither of those play a part in ensuring that we look after the sort of health and mental health and well-being of our customers and our teams?
Yeah, so I mean, I think data and technology can be used for good, especially on these instances, right? Like, let's give the example of right now we're not talking face to face, right? There is COVID, and even if you were here in Atlanta, Georgia, we were having this discussion virtually. So technology can be a way for us to create a safe space in the time of COVID. That's one little example. Another example is, I'm sure many of you use some kind of phone or some kind of device to track how are you, how many steps you make a day, if you're standing up enough. There are things that we can do to give us nudges to help us put us in the right mental spot to have a great day and do things. Like, I am not a fan, or I was not a fan of using technology personally for me before to exercise, for example. But now I'm starting to use it and I see, oh, this is reminding me that I need to stand up more. This is reminding me that I need to go and take a walk, So there are ways to use it in that respect. And have you familiar with the Pokemon Go video game phenomenon that happened? Yeah.
I remember, yeah.
To me, I'm very certain Pokemon Go, somebody from the Pokemon Go company can push back on me if that was the case, but I'm very certain they never expected to have an impact on the well-being of people the way they had it.
Yeah.
Because it's a augmented reality game. It's very entertaining to have, but that game by itself had more impact on kids, young adults, and people in general who like to play that game in terms of walking outside, which is one of the best things you can do for your mental health. And even the government here in the US tried to do this for many years, and they couldn't achieve the same results, even though they have the whole power of the US government behind them with all this marketing and all this, like the first lady pushing for it. And she was the first one to admit it, like, hey, if this is what it takes for people to go outside and walk, great, let's have it.
Yeah. No, that's great. Is there any examples from within Starbucks or Schneider or Walmart, your previous roles, where you've seen this sort of be effective?
Yeah. So let me talk a little bit about, I had my recent experience with an implementation for augmented analytics in Schneider, right? And we call this project the People Analytics iPortal. And the idea was, how do we enable online workforce so they can make more decisions? And by having this kind of technology, it allows us to free up a lot of their time, because you spend a lot of time in organizations trying to reconcile data, or sometimes create reports, or sometimes you don't, you have all these meetings to ask these questions. And by having the right technology, you can actually have the end user just interact with a portal and ask one question, and then follow up with 70 questions if you like to, to get to the whole answer that you need to have. I think using that kind of technology and analytics and data and AI for the benefit of freeing up their time of humans is one of the best things we can do in organizations. And then that doesn't mean that the human is not going to have a job or it's not going to have the same impact. It's the opposite. Now you can focus as a consultant, or you can be more empathetic. You can work on your leadership. You can focus on your customers. That's what we should be spending our time. We shouldn't be spending our times on repetitive work or things that should be done by algorithms or machines. We should let the algorithm, the machine, do what they do best, and we as humans should do what we do best. That's the way it should be.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah, I not thought of it in that way before. The level of frustration, the level of anxiety, the level of long hours, early mornings, late nights to prepare packs and data sets, and manually reconcile things because the system can't. But in reality, the system can if we get that right. There's this story I've told before, actually, about at a previous company. One of the biggest activities we did to drive buy-in for a more advanced agenda for data was remove the finance team basically working Sunday nights and early Monday mornings to get the trading pack ready for the board meeting or the trading meeting on Monday. And when you remove, when you give people Sunday nights back, you earn some credit, but also, they're freed up. It's not as stressful a job, and that is positively impacting on their well-being.
Yeah. And I will tell you, you will be surprised on how much this can make a difference. Like, even for analytics teams, I don't know what has been your experience talking to maybe other analytics leaders, but the analytics teams that I know and the data that I've seen from the industry, because of COVID and because of all this disruption and uncertainty, they're getting more questions, right? So if you're in an analytics team, you're actually feeling more pressure now that you were feeling perhaps in 2019, because you're getting so many questions. And in some cases, you might be doing 10 hours or even 20 hours extra to what you were doing on a day-to-day. So if I can take all that extra work from you and allow like augmented analytics and AI to take care of that for you, you will feel so much more better. And in my case, I love what I do. I don't mind doing presentations or doing research during the weekends, because it is part of my passion. It's my personal DNA, but I like to do it because I love it. I don't want to do it because I have a deadline on Monday for the financial, report or whatever, right?
Discretionary. You want it to be discretionary, not.
Yeah, because I want to be inspired. I want to use my creativity.
Yeah. On that subject, you're clearly very passionate about this topic, and I actually love the fact that we're talking about we're talking about sort of data and analytics and the impact that has on human potential, but we've hardly spoken about that at all, data analytics at all. And I think that's right. This is a human thing, and we want to, and you've mentioned augmented reality, but we want to augment what humans do with smart technology and smart data, but it's almost just a solution to what is a greater purpose and objective that we're trying to get to. But where's your passion for this topic come from? Where's this sort of burning drive that you have that you talked through today? Where do you think that's been born out of?
Well, I guess in my journey, I went through different stages, and I started like really thinking about like, hey, what is my purpose? What am I trying to accomplish? Where do I get my energy as well, right? Like where do I feel like I can make a bigger difference? And everybody should have their own legacy and what do they stand for, right? So I guess at some point in your career, you find your voice and you realize why you do the things that you do. I grew up in a very socially close culture in Panama, I would say, right? And I was a kid. I was like 10 years old, and I was already like working with the government to try to do campaigns to prevent dengue epidemics in Panama. And, even as a kid, I was doing that. When I look back to those times, I'm thinking, wow, my parents were so brave to allow me to be just with me and my group of friends, going around the country, trying to spread a message of, taking care of the country. How do you prevent, an epidemic of dengue? So I guess that those kind of experiences shaped my life. Plus, I think I mentioned to you in a previous call that my father founded FEMA, or Protección Civil, which is kind of like the FEMA for Panama for natural disasters. He was also very involved with the Red Cross. So growing up, I had a lot of, exposure to, why do we need to do things beyond just, corporate, but looking into society and putting the community together. So I guess that was part of my experience, but I see the potential in analytics. I feel that we in analytics have such a responsibility and power to make a difference with data and helping people know where to focus, that now I cannot unsee that, if that makes sense, right? And now I have to do what I think is right.
No, it's back to what you talked about at the beginning, the sort of the greater reason for doing these things, the greater purpose for doing this. It's not about doing analytics for the sake of it. It's not about building models for the sake of it. It's an end purpose in mind. And if that can be to improve human potential or improve make someone's life easier, or any of the other examples we've talked about, then great, fantastic, right? That's what this is all about.
And if you are hearing this or listening this, I just want to tell you, this is not how I started. I started on this journey because purely I was in love to doing modeling and analytics. That was the thing that really drove me. And I'm telling you, I used to stay on the computer so much that my supervisor had to fight with me and drag me and say, Gustavo, we need you in the meeting. You have to come in the meeting and talk to the people about the findings. That was like, this is a true story. I got mad because they were pulling me away from the computer to do what I love to do, was the modeling, instead of going to the meeting and actually talking to the people about
the outcome.
What are we trying to do? What is going to be the impact? But, I guess I understand why people are so in love with the data and with the system. Does that make sense? But at the same time, now that I look back, it was part of it was like a phase in my life, I guess, right?
Well, it's given you good experience. I mean, you're in, I think you were in marketing and business continuity and sort of people analytics. So, of course, I suppose I bet some of that has been, going from marketing to people analytics. Actually, marketing and people analytics is actually quite similar, isn't it? Marketing is about analyzing consumer behavior and then messaging most effectively to those people to drive the thing that you want to drive, which is normally you get them to spend some more money or do a thing. People analytics is quite similar, isn't it? I guess that's about understanding humans and understanding what drives them, motivates them, how you get the best out of them.
Yes. And I want to clarify this, because when I talk about people analytics, some of the audience might think about HR. This is not about HR.
Yeah.
Customers are people, communities are people, your workforce are people. When I talk about people analytics, you need to be looking at everything. I'm fortunate that I'm in an organization where analytics is a function and you have all the different aspects and dimensions of analytics under one space.
Right.
It makes it easier for the audience to understand that we're looking at everything, right? I think the challenge that we have in some organizations is there are silos. There is like the global supply chain analytics, there is the HR analytics, the marketing analytics, and that's why things don't connect. And guess what happens? The reality is you have all these different leaders putting together stories in PowerPoints. Those PowerPoints get basically elevated to the executive committee, and then they try to put the story together from a bunch of PowerPoints to make it click, as opposed to like, hey, let's look at everything as a holistic, approach, and then have the conclusions and then show it a very consistent and cohesive storytelling for the leadership so they can make the best choice. That's a different approach altogether, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's sensible to chop up your analytics so that it's not too big a job. But I think you're right that humans are humans. Human analytics, it should be called that. But there's a lot, psychology and social science, people science. There's all sorts of angles that are outside of that kind of core data crunching that analysts and data folk like to kind of focus on, and as important, right? They're as important as the running the model. It's looking closely at humans and what drives them. Yeah,
and I think this is a very pragmatic suggestion for everybody here. Is when you hire people, ask me like, Gustavo, what is your criteria for hiring? And I usually like to work with very smart and nice people. That's usually like my number one criteria. We have values. And beyond that, when I create my organization or my team, I wanted to do it thinking about the storytelling, meaning, you have to have the data engineers or the data architects who understand the data piece. You need to have the people who know the modeling and statisticians. You need to have the engineering for the process. But also you have to have IO psychologists and people who understand human behavior. Yeah. Because there are two aspects. Once you do your research and you implement your solution, humans are the ones who are going to be implementing the solution in the day-to-day stores, right? Yeah. And it needs to click with them, number one. And number two, if you are implementing AI, how do you make sure the AI is unbiased? How do you make sure your algorithms are actually getting you to the right result? You need to have people with the expertise on IO psychologists, sociologists. I mean, in my team, we have people who are epidemiologists, IO psychologists, data engineers, statisticians. I mean, you have to have that mix of people to truly get to that story and to make sure that the data from the first place is unbiased to tell the right story, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. It does. It does. Well, look, we could talk forever, and I'd love to talk again, but I think we'll wrap up for this episode. Listen, I really, really appreciate talking to you. Fascinating to hear your background and where your passion for human potential comes from, and how that can be applied in technology and analytics and data. So, really, really appreciate you being on the show, Gustavo. Thanks.
No, thank you so much for having me. And if I can leave you with one advice, it will be bold. In times of disruption and transformation, you need to have the courage to make the right thing for the people. And again, take care of your workforce, take care of your customers, take care of your community, and you're going to be fine. Be well, and I hope to see you soon.
Yeah, love it. Thanks, Gustavo. Thanks, everyone, for listening. We'll see you again soon.